On the peaceful planet of Narik, different species lived together in harmony, sharing the beauty of their world. The planet was a place where humans, aliens, and creatures from all over the galaxy could find refuge and live side by side. Narik was known for its warm sunsets, soft winds, and green fields that stretched endlessly. It was a place of peace, a place where no one should feel alone or unwanted. But on this beautiful world, there was one small alien girl who felt that way every single day. Her name was Lyra. She was tiny, even by the standards of the alien species she belonged to. With soft lavender skin, large round eyes that sparkled green, and delicate wings that fluttered when she was excited, Lyra looked different from the other children. Her kind, the Talarians, were known for their peaceful nature and their small, graceful appearance. However, to the children of the human colony, Lyra was seen as weak and fragile. Lyra had only recently come to Narik after her home planet was destroyed in a distant war. Her family was one of the few survivors who fled to Narik, hoping to start a new life. But despite the welcoming beauty of the planet, Lyra found herself in a new world filled with strangers. Her soft, quiet voice and shy nature made her stand out, and not always in a good way. The children at the colony quickly noticed Lyra's differences. The way her wings moved delicately when she tried to fly, her small frame that often made her appear as if she might break in a strong wind, made her a target for teasing. They would whisper behind her back, laugh when she stumbled or tripped, and sometimes they would even push her aside when she tried to join in their games. Lyra tried to avoid them, often hiding in the quiet corners of the colony. But the bullies always seemed to find her. They would corner her in the playground or near the market, laughing at how tiny she was, or mocking the way her wings flapped awkwardly. "Get the little bug," one would sneer. "Think she'll fly away, little bird?" Another would laugh. At first, Lyra tried to ignore them, hoping if she stayed quiet, they would leave her alone. But it only made it worse. Taunts grew louder, the bullying more frequent. It seemed as if no one cared about her. Lyra began to wonder if she would ever find a place where she belonged. One afternoon, after another day of teasing, Lyra walked home slowly, her head hanging low. Her heart felt heavy. She longed for a friend, someone who would look past her wings, her size, and her differences. Someone who would see her for who she really was, a kind and gentle soul who wanted nothing more than to feel at home. As she walked along the path near the center of the colony, a group of older children approached her. They were the worst of the bullies, always mocking and pushing her around. "Hey, little Talarian," one of them called out in a sing-song voice, stepping in front of her. "Going to cry again? Do you think your tiny wings are going to save you?" Lyra stepped back, her wings fluttering nervously. She wanted to run, but she knew there was nowhere to go. The group laughed loudly, and one of them pushed her, making her stumble. Her small body hit the ground with a soft thud, and for a moment everything went quiet. "Why do you keep bothering her?" someone asked from behind. Lyra's eyes widened in surprise. It wasn't one of the children who had been bullying her. The voice was deep, firm, and full of authority. She turned her head to see who had spoken. A young man stood in the distance. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing the uniform of the Narik Peace Force, a symbol of protection and safety for the colony. He wasn't one of the soldiers who typically patrolled the area, but his presence was enough to stop the bullies in their tracks. The bullies turned around, looking at the newcomer. They recognized him immediately. It was Jake, a young human who had recently joined the Peace Force. He was new to the colony, a fresh face who had come to train under the guidance of the older officers. Jake wasn't someone anyone would expect to come to Lyra's defense. He was known for his strong build and his seriousness. He had a reputation of being quiet, determined, and often distant. But today, Jake's eyes burned with something different, something protective. "Why are you picking on someone smaller than you?" Jake asked again, his voice even, but with a force that made the bullies take a step back. They didn't expect him to stand up for Lyra, after all. The bullies had been making fun of her for weeks. They thought they could get away with it because she was small and quiet. But now they were faced with someone who wasn't going to turn a blind eye. The children exchanged nervous glances. They weren't sure what to do. They knew Jake wasn't. Afraid to stand up for what was right. "Leave her alone," Jake said, his tone leaving no room for argument. One of the bullies tried to step forward, but Jake didn't move. Instead, he placed his hand firmly on the boy's chest, pushing him back gently, but with enough force to make him stumble. The bullies, realizing they were no match for Jake, finally backed away, muttering insults under their breath as they left. Lyra watched in awe as the group disappeared into the distance. She was still on the ground, her knees scraped and her wings ruffled, but something inside her felt different. For the first time since coming to Narik, someone had stood up for her. Jake turned to her, kneeling down beside her with a kind smile. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft and warm, his eyes full of concern locked with hers. Lyra nodded, though she didn't speak at first. She was surprised. No one had ever asked her that before. No one had ever cared enough to stop the bullying and offer a helping hand. Jake gently helped her to her feet, dusting off the dirt from her lavender skin. "I'm sorry they treated you that way," Jake said sincerely. "You don't deserve it." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes still filled with uncertainty. "Thank you," she whispered. "No one ever stands up for me." "You're not alone anymore," Jake replied, his smile warm and reassuring. From that moment on, something changed for Lyra. The world felt a little less scary. And for the first time, she felt as though she had a friend. The days after that afternoon were different for Lyra. The bullying didn't stop immediately. But the presence of Jake made her feel a little safer. He would walk by her during the day, checking in on her, making sure no one was bothering her. Whenever he was around, Lyra felt like she didn't have to hide. She didn't feel so small, so fragile anymore. Lyra was still a quiet, reserved girl, but Jake's kindness had a way of breaking through her shell. Every time they met, he would offer her a small smile or ask her about her day. Even when she didn't feel like talking, his presence made her feel less alone. It was clear that Jake didn't see her as weak. He saw her as a person, someone who deserved respect. The other children began to notice Jake's attention toward Lyra. At first, they weren't sure what to make of it. Some of them snickered, thinking it was just a passing thing. Others seemed to understand that Jake wasn't the kind of person who would stand by while someone was treated badly. They had seen how fiercely he had stood up to the bullies. They could see the way Lyra's eyes lit up when she saw him, and they couldn't help but wonder about the bond that was growing between them. One afternoon, as Lyra sat near the fountain, sketching the landscape of Narik, she noticed a familiar figure walking toward her. Jake was there again. He always seemed to show up at the right time. "Hey, Lyra," Jake said, sitting down beside her. "How are you doing today?" Lyra smiled shyly. "I'm okay, just drawing." She held up the small pad of paper where she had been sketching. The scenery. It wasn't much, just some simple lines and shapes, but it made her feel better. It was the one thing she could do to express herself without words. Jake glanced at the drawing, genuinely impressed. "That's really good. You're an artist." Lyra's cheeks flushed with a mix of embarrassment and pride. "I try," she said softly. "I've always liked drawing. It's my way of feeling better." Jake nodded, understanding. "Get it. Sometimes it's hard to say how you feel with words, but art, drawing, it can speak for you." For a moment, the two of them sat in comfortable silence, just looking at the view around them. The air was warm, and the sound of the water and the fountain was soothing. Lyra felt peaceful for the first time in a while. But the quiet wasn't meant to last. From behind them, the sound of footsteps grew louder. Lyra's heart sank as she heard familiar voices approaching. It was the same group of bullies who had been tormenting her. They must have seen Jake with her and decided to make trouble again. Lyra quickly stood up, clutching her drawing pad to her chest as if it could protect her. She turned to Jake, her eyes wide with worry. "Jake, I think they're coming back." Jake turned around just in time to see the group of bullies walk into view. They were all sneering, their faces filled with mocking laughter. They saw Jake, sitting with Lyra, and the leader of the group, a tall boy named Mark, raised an eyebrow. Well, Mark said with a smirk. What's this? The big hero is babysitting the little alien girl now? Lyra shrank back, feeling small again. She had been hoping that the bullies would leave her alone for once, but it seemed like they would never stop. But this time, things were different. This time, Jake wasn't going to let them have their way. I'm not babysitting her, Jake replied calmly, standing up to face them. His posture was firm, but his voice was steady, not angry. I'm just talking to a friend. Mark laughed, but his laugh wasn't friendly. It was cruel. The same laugh he used when he tried to make someone feel inferior. A friend? Hey? Please. She's nothing but a weak little alien. She doesn't even belong here. Jake's face hardened, but he didn't raise his voice. I've told you before, Mark. You don't get to treat her like that. Not while I'm here. The other bullies looked at each other, unsure of how to react. They had never seen anyone stand up to Mark like this, especially not someone like Jake, who was new to the colony. They had expected Jake to be like everyone else, to turn a blind eye to the bullying, but he wasn't, and that made them uncomfortable. You really think you can stop us? Mark challenged, stepping closer. To Jake, what are you going to do about it? I'm not going to do anything, Jake said, his voice calm but firm. But you're going to leave her alone. Right now. Lyra couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had never seen anyone stand up to the bullies like this before. In the past, she had always been too afraid to speak up, and no one had ever been brave enough to do it for her. But Jake wasn't afraid. He stood his ground, showing them that he would protect her, no matter what. Mark paused for a moment, looking into Jake's eyes. He could see the determination there. For a moment, it seemed like the bully might back down. But then, with a snarl, he shoved Jake hard in the chest. Jake didn't budge. He didn't raise his fists. Instead, he simply held up his hands and said, You're not going to win by pushing people around. You can try all you want, but you won't get away with it. Mark's expression faltered, and the other bullies grew quieter. They didn't know what to do now. They had been so sure that they could get away with it. But Jake was different. He wasn't afraid to face them, and that made them unsure. After a long moment, Mark finally turned and motioned for the others to follow him. This isn't over, he muttered under his breath. Jake watched them leave. His posture still strong, but his eyes softened when he looked at Lyra. Are you okay? Lyra nodded, still shocked by what had just happened. Yeah. I think. So, good, Jake said with a smile. They won't bother you again. I won't let them. Lyra felt a warmth in her chest. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was alone. She wasn't weak, and she wasn't invisible. She had someone by her side who cared. Thank you, she whispered. Jake smiled, his voice kind. Any time, Lyra. From that day on, Jake made it his mission to protect Lyra, not just from the bullies, but from the loneliness she had felt. For so long, and as time went on, the bond between them only grew stronger. The days following the confrontation were peaceful. At least for Lyra, the bullies didn't dare approach her again, knowing Jake was always nearby. Lyra began to feel safer, but there was something more that changed inside her. She was beginning to trust again. She had been hurt for so long by the cruel words and actions of others. But Jake's kindness and bravery gave her hope that maybe, just maybe, not everyone saw her as weak. Over the next few weeks, Jake and Lyra spent more time together. Every day, Jake would stop by to see how she was doing, offering a warm smile and a helping hand. They would sit together in the quiet corners of the colony, and Jake would listen as Lyra shared her thoughts. Even though Lyra spoke very little at first, Jake patiently listened, letting her take her time as they grew closer. Jake noticed more about Lyra. She was a quiet soul, but she had a passion for drawing. Every day, she would bring out her sketchbook and fill it with pictures of the world around her, the tall trees, the vibrant flowers, the animals that roamed the land. She even drew pictures of the colony, the people who lived there. And sometimes, she would draw her memories of her old home planet. One afternoon, Jake asked her about her family. Lyra paused, her eyes falling to the ground. She hadn't spoken about her past much, not since coming to Narik. It was a painful subject for her. But Jake's gentle nature made her feel safe, and for the first time in a long while, she opened up. "I had a family," Lyra said softly. "They were kind, just like you. My parents, my little brother. We were happy on our home planet. But then the war came. My planet was destroyed, and I lost them. I was the only one who made it out." Jake's heart ached as he listened to her. Couldn't imagine the pain she had gone through. Lyra, the sweet, gentle girl who always tried to keep a smile on her face, had lost everything. She had no one left except the memories of her family. But here she was, on a strange new world, still trying to find her place. "I'm so sorry." "Lyra," Jake said quietly, his voice full of compassion. "That's something no one should ever have to go through." Lyra nodded but didn't say more. She had said enough for now, and she was grateful for Jake's understanding. For the first time since arriving on Narek, she didn't feel so alone in her grief. Jake reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder, offering comfort. "You don't have to be alone anymore," he said softly. "I'll always be here for you." Lyra looked up at him, her green eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'm not used to having someone care about me." From that moment on, their bond grew stronger. Every day they spent time together. Jake taught Lyra about Earth, telling her stories of his childhood, of his family, and the adventures he had before joining the Peace Force. Lyra, in turn, showed Jake her drawings and shared the beauty of her world with him. She told him about the people of her home planet, how they lived in peace, and how much she missed them. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jake took Lyra to the edge of the colony where they could look out over the fields. They stood together, side by side, watching the peaceful world around them. "I used to watch the sunsets with my family," Lyra said softly. "We would sit outside and talk about the stars. My little brother would always ask questions about them, like how many there were or if we could ever visit them. I miss that." Jake looked over at her, his heart filled with sympathy. "I can't imagine what it must be like to lose everything," he said gently. "But you're not alone now, Lyra. I'm here, and I'll do everything I can to help you." Lyra smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you, Jake," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "You've made me feel like I belong here." Jake smiled back, his eyes sincere. "You do belong here, and I'm glad we found each other." As the days passed, the two of them became inseparable. They shared laughter, stories, and moments of peace. Jake's bravery in standing up for Lyra had given her strength, and now she was learning to find her own voice again. She was no longer the quiet, fearful girl who hid from the bullies. With Jake's support, she was starting to become someone who could stand tall, even in the face of adversity. One day, as they walked through the market, Lyra noticed a group of children looking at her. She felt her heart race, remembering the bullying from before, but this time something was different. Instead of turning away or hiding, she stood tall, feeling the strength she had gained from Jake's friendship. "Hi, Lyra," one of the children called out. Lyra looked over, surprised to hear a friendly voice. It was one of the children who had once joined in with the bullying, but now the child was smiling at her, not with mockery, but with genuine warmth. "Hi," Lyra said cautiously, her voice soft but steady. The child smiled. "I saw your drawings. They're really good. Would you mind showing me how to draw?" Lyra blinked, stunned. She never expected anyone to ask her to teach them. The children who once teased her were now reaching out in kindness. It felt like a small victory. It's a moment of change that showed how much things had shifted. "I'd like that," Lyra replied, a smile slowly forming on her face. She felt proud of herself, proud of how far she had come as she began to teach the child how to draw. Jake stood off to the side, watching the scene with a quiet smile. He was proud of Lyra. She had come so far, and he could see how much she was growing, not just as an artist, but as a person. Was bullied anymore? She was a strong, kind-hearted person who was finding her place in this new world. Lyra looked over at Jake, her smile wide. "Thank you for everything," she said, her voice full of gratitude. "I don't know where I'd be without you." Jake's Smile softened. "You'd be just fine, Lyra, but I'm glad I could help." And with that, they both knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter for Lyra. The girl who once felt so alone was now finding her place in the world. Not as a victim, but as a hero in her own right. With Jake by her side, there was no limit to what she could achieve. For a few weeks, life in the colony seemed peaceful. Lyra continued to grow stronger, and Jake's presence was a constant source of support. The bullies who once tormented her had stopped. At least, they had stopped bothering her directly. Lyra was no longer the frightened girl who ran from them. She was starting to find her voice, her place. But even in the calmest moments, a small part of her still feared the worst. She had seen how people could be cruel, and sometimes, no matter how hard you tried, things didn't always stay peaceful. She knew the bullies hadn't forgotten about her. It was only a matter of time before they came back. Jake noticed that Lyra seemed more on edge lately. Even though she was smiling more often and engaging with others, he could tell something was still bothering her. One evening, after they spent a quiet afternoon in the fields, Lyra stopped walking suddenly. Jake turned to her, concern in his eyes. "What's wrong, Lyra?" he asked gently. Lyra hesitated for a moment, then looked up at him, her expression serious. "I know they'll come back. The bullies. I can feel it." Jake's heart sank. He had hoped that things had truly changed, but he understood. The pain Lyra had felt couldn't just disappear overnight. He reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to worry. If they come back, I'll be here," he said firmly, his voice steady and full of promise. Lyra looked at him, and for a moment, she felt comforted. But deep down, she knew Jake couldn't always protect her. She had to learn to stand on her own. She didn't want to rely on him forever. He had already done so much for her. It was time for her to take charge of her own fate. The next day, as Lyra made her way through the colony, she saw the group of bullies again. But this time, they weren't laughing or pointing at her. They were standing together, speaking in hushed tones. Mark, the leader of the group, looked over his shoulder at Lyra with a sneer. Lyra's heart raced, and she felt the familiar wave of anxiety rise in her chest. She wasn't sure what they were up to, but she knew it wouldn't be good. As she walked past them, Mark stepped forward, blocking her path. His expression was no longer playful. It was cold and serious. "Going somewhere, little alien?" Mark sneered. Lyra stopped, her wings fluttering nervously. She tried to gather her courage, but her voice felt stuck in her throat. She glanced around, hoping to see Jake, but he wasn't anywhere in sight. She was alone. Mark took another step closer, his eyes narrowing. "You think just because you've got some human friend, you're untouchable? You think we're scared of you now?" His voice was low, threatening. Lyra swallowed hard, her body trembling. She wasn't sure what to say. She didn't want to back down, but she also didn't want things to escalate. She had already been hurt too many times before she could speak. Another voice interrupted the tension. "Leave her alone, Mark." Lyra looked up, surprised to see one of the other children from the colony standing at the edge of the group. It was a girl, one who had once joined in with the bullying, but had started to talk to Lyra more recently. The girl's name was Olivia, and she had been kind to Lyra after the incident with Jake. "Olivia, stay out of this," Mark growled, his anger rising. But Olivia didn't back down. She stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "No, you're being cruel. Lyra doesn't deserve this, and neither do I." Lyra's eyes widened as she watched Olivia stand up to Mark. She had never imagined that someone who had once been part of the bullying would speak out for her. But there it was. Olivia was defending her. Mark scowled, clearly annoyed. "This isn't over," he muttered, turning and walking away with the other bullies following him, all still throwing angry glances in Lyra's direction. Lyra stood, frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Olivia, of all people, had stood up to Mark. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. She wasn't sure why Olivia had changed her attitude toward her, but she was grateful. Grateful, in a way that words couldn't fully express. You defended me," Lyra said softly, still in disbelief. Olivia gave her a small, unsure smile. "I didn't like seeing you get treated that way. It wasn't right. No one should be bullied." Lyra's heart swelled with emotion. It was the first time someone had spoken out on her behalf in a way that made her feel seen. She didn't have to be the girl hiding in the corner anymore. She had allies, and she wasn't alone. "Thank you," Lyra said, her voice trembling with gratitude. I don't know what to say," Olivia shrugged. "You don't have to say anything. Just know that if they try again, I'm not going to let them get away with it." Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She hadn't expected this kind of kindness from anyone, especially not from someone who had once been part of the problem. Made her realize that things were changing slowly but surely. She wasn't the only one who could make a difference. Later that day, Jake found Lyra sitting alone on a bench near the park. She was deep in thought, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing patterns on the stone surface. When she saw him approaching, she looked up, a mixture of emotions in her eyes. "Hey," Jake said gently, sitting down beside her. "How are you doing?" Lyra hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I'm okay. The bullies, they tried again, but this time, someone else stood up for me." Jake raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Who?" Lyra said, her voice still soft with wonder. She defended me. She told Mark to leave me alone." Jake smiled warmly, proud of the progress Lyra had made. "That's amazing. I'm glad to hear it. See, you're not alone, Lyra. You've got people who care about you." Lyra smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't just Jake anymore. Olivia's actions had shown her that there were others who saw her for who she really was. Wasn't just the small alien girl anymore. She was someone worth standing up for. "I'm not alone," Lyra whispered. To herself, as if hearing the words for the first time, Jake's smile softened as he watched her. He had seen her grow so much, from the scared girl hiding in the shadows to the brave young person who was starting to find her place in the world. "We're all in this together," Jake said, his voice full of conviction. "And nothing can stop us now." Lyra looked out at the horizon, her heart light for the first time in a long while. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. And with the support of people like Jake and Olivia, she knew she could face whatever came. Next. The days after Olivia's stand against the bullies felt different. Lyra was no longer walking through the colony with the same fear in her heart. She felt lighter, stronger. The weight of the bullying no longer hovered over her like a dark cloud. For the first time since arriving on Narik, she began to believe in the kindness of others. She still had moments of doubt, of course. The bullies hadn't completely disappeared from her life. They still gave her nasty looks when they saw her, and Mark's sneer was still fresh in her mind. But there was something that had changed in her, something they hadn't been able to take away. The change didn't go unnoticed by others in the colony either. People who had once ignored Lyra started to approach her, offering kind words and small gestures of friendship. Even some of the other children who had once teased her began to speak to her more. There were still a few who looked at her with suspicion, but for the most part, the colony had started to embrace her. One afternoon, as Lyra and Jake walked through the market, a group of children approached them. Lyra had learned to walk with her head a little higher now, but she still felt a flutter of nervousness when she saw a group of people coming her way. "Hey, Lyra." "Ah!" a voice called out. Lyra turned to see Olivia standing there, smiling. She was with a couple of other children, and to Lyra's surprise, they were all looking at her with friendly expressions. "I've been thinking," Olivia said, her voice full of excitement. "Why don't we all go out to the fields tomorrow? We can have a picnic. You can bring some of your drawings, and I'll bring some snacks. It'll be fun." Lyra blinked, surprised by the invitation. "A picnic? With other children?" "I don't know what to say," Lyra replied, her voice filled with uncertainty. She had never really been part of a group like this before. She had spent most of her time alone, hiding from others, too scared to try making friends. "You don't have to say anything," Olivia said with a grin. "Just come. We want to spend time with you." Lyra felt her heart swell. The kindness in Olivia's words made her feel warm inside. It wasn't just Olivia anymore. It was the others too, ones who were starting to see her as someone worthy of being friends with. She smiled, the first real smile she had given in weeks. "I'd love to," she said softly. The next day, Lyra arrived at the field, her heart racing with excitement and nerves. She had never been invited to something like this before, and it felt strange to be surrounded by so many children, all of them laughing and talking. But as she laid out the blanket and started unpacking her drawings, she realized that she was having fun. They were all so kind, and it felt so different from the bullying she had been used to. As the afternoon wore on, Lyra became more comfortable. She showed her drawings to the others, and they all praised her work, asking her to teach them how to draw. She hadn't expected that. She had always felt like her art was something only she cared about. But here, with these children, her art mattered. They admired it, and it made her feel proud. Even Mark, the leader of the bullies, showed up with some of the other children. Lyra tensed when she saw him, but to her surprise, he didn't come over to tease her. Instead, he stood off to the side, watching everyone else. His expression was different this time, his usual smugness replaced by something unreadable. Jake, who had joined the picnic too, noticed Lyra's discomfort. He sat down beside her, offering her a comforting smile. "Don't let him ruin your day," he said softly. "This is your time. Enjoy it." Lyra nodded, taking a deep breath. She was learning to let go of the fear that had controlled her for so long. She wasn't going to let Mark's presence steal this moment from her, as the day came to a close. The group packed up their things, chatting and laughing together. Lyra had never felt so happy. She had made real friends, people who cared about her, who saw her for who she truly was. Before they all left, Olivia came up to Lyra with a smile. "See, it wasn't so bad," she said. "I knew you'd have a great time." Lyra smiled, her heart full. "Thank you. I've never done anything like this before." "It was perfect." Olivia laughed. "I'm glad. We'll do it again sometime." "Okay?" Lyra nodded, the weight of the past few months lifting from her shoulders. She had finally found a place where she belonged. It wasn't just about having people to sit with or play with. It was about feeling accepted, feeling like she was part of something. For the first time since coming to Narik, Lyra felt like she was truly home. The next day, however, things took an unexpected turn. Lyra had just finished a drawing in her favorite quiet spot when she noticed a group of familiar faces walking toward her. It was the bullies, but this time, they didn't look angry. They didn't look like they were there to tease her. Mark walked up to her, his hands in his pockets, his usual arrogant look replaced by something softer. "Lyra, can we talk?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. Lyra looked at him, unsure of what to do. Jake was nowhere in sight, and she was alone. But there was something different in Mark's expression. He didn't look like the same person who had tormented her. "For weeks, why are you here?" Lyra asked cautiously, her voice small but steady. I wanted to apologize," Mark said, "for everything. The teasing, the bullying. I didn't think it was that bad. But after seeing you with everyone, I realized how wrong I was." Lyra blinked in surprise. Mark, apologizing. It didn't make sense, but the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. "I'm sorry for the way I treated you," Mark continued. Looking down at the ground, "You didn't deserve it?" Lyra stood still, processing his words. She had never imagined hearing an apology from him, let alone one that sounded so genuine. She had been ready to face the same old insults, but instead, she found herself standing in front of someone who had changed. I don't know what to say," Lyra said quietly. "You don't have to say anything," Mark said. "Just know that I'm sorry." Lyra stood there, unsure of how to respond. She had always imagined that the bullies would never change, that they would always be cruel. But Mark had surprised her. People could change. She could change. And maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as cruel as she had once thought. With a nod, Lyra gave him a soft smile. "It's okay." "Thank you." Mark nodded, then turned and walked away, his footsteps quieter than before, as Lyra watched him leave. She felt a sense of peace settle over her. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. No matter what came next, she knew she could handle it. She had friends now, people who cared. And that made all the difference. Lyra's life had changed in ways she never thought possible. The once timid girl who had hidden from the bullies, who had felt small and invisible, was now someone different. She had friends, people who cared about her. She no longer felt like an outsider. The change was slow, but it was real. The children who once ignored her, who had laughed at her for being different, now came to her for advice. They admired her drawings, asked her about her life on her home planet, and listened when she shared her stories. Even Mark, the bully who had caused her so much pain, had turned around and apologized. It was a moment she would never forget, and it was proof that people could change. But the greatest change came from within Lyra herself. She had found the courage to be herself, to stand tall and proud. She had learned not to let the past define her, and not to be afraid of the future. And much of that courage came from the one person who had never given up on her, Jake. Jake was more than just a protector. He was her friend, someone who believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. He had stood by her when no one else did, and now Lyra was learning to stand on her own. She was no longer the fragile, small alien girl hiding in the shadows. She was becoming someone stronger, someone who could face whatever came next. One afternoon, as the sun began to set over the peaceful world of Narik, Lyra sat by the fountain, her sketchbook open in front of her. She was drawing again, her favorite way to express herself. The sketches of her home planet were always the most detailed, capturing the beauty she had lost but never forgotten. She wanted to keep those memories alive, not just for herself, but for the world around her. Jake walked over, as he often did, and sat beside her. He had come to see how she was doing, as he always did after a long day of training with the Peace Force. "Hey, how's the drawing going?" he asked, his voice calm and gentle. Lyra smiled and turned the page of her sketchbook, showing him her latest work. It's about home," she said softly. "I like to draw the stars. They remind me of my family." Jake looked at the drawing, seeing the intricate patterns of distant galaxies and shining stars. He knew how important these memories were to Lyra, how they connected her to a place she could never return to. But he also saw how far she had come from the scared girl he had first met. She was no longer running from her past. She was embracing it. "Your drawings are beautiful," Jake said, his voice full of admiration. "You've got a gift, Lyra." Lyra looked at him, her green eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Jake. You've helped me find it." Jake gave her a small, sincere smile. "You did the hard part. I just helped you see it." For a moment, they sat in silence, the sound of the fountain filling the air. It was peaceful, a moment of calm in the busy life of the colony. Lyra leaned back, looking up at the sky. The stars were starting to appear, twinkling softly in the darkening sky. "Dude, you ever think about going home?" Jake asked, his voice quiet. Lyra nodded, but there was no sadness in her expression. "I think about it sometimes," she said. "But I'm starting to realize that maybe this is home now. I've made friends here. I have people who care about me. And I'm not alone anymore." Jake nodded, understanding. He knew how hard it had been for her to accept this new life, to accept that she could belong somewhere again. But he had watched her grow, watched her find strength in herself and in the people around her. He was proud of her. "You're not alone," Jake said, his voice steady, "and you never will be." Lyra smiled at him, feeling a warmth in her chest. She knew that Jake would always be there for her. But she also knew that she had become strong on her own. She had learned that. The true power came from within herself. The next day, as Lyra walked through the colony, she noticed something different. The children who had once ignored her or laughed at her now greeted her with smiles. Olivia waved at her from across the market, and even some of the adults nodded in her direction, offering friendly words. It wasn't just that she had found her place among the people. It was that the people had found their place with her. They saw her as someone who was not just the small, fragile alien girl, but as someone with strength, talent, a kind heart. Lyra had finally become part of the community in a way she never imagined possible. She wasn't just living in the colony, she was a part of it, part of the family. That afternoon she met Jake again, this time in the open field where they often spent time together. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the land. It was a perfect day, and Lyra couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over her. "Jake," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for everything. You saved me from being alone. You helped me find my way." Jake smiled, a small but sincere smile. "Oh, you did all the hard work, Lyra. I just helped you see what was already inside you." Lyra shook her head, her smile brighter now. "You're wrong. Without you, I would never have found the strength to stand up for myself. You're the one who showed me that I could be more than what the bullies said I was, and that means everything." Expressions softened, and for a moment they both stood in silence, watching the sunset together. Lyra realized that she didn't need to be afraid anymore. She had found her place, and with the support of Jake and her new friends, she knew she could face whatever came next. "I think," Lyra said, her voice full of determination, "that I'm ready to show the world who I really am." Jake nodded, his smile full of pride. "I already know who you are, Lyra, and the world is about to see it too." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Lyra felt a new sense of purpose. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was someone who had the strength to live, to thrive, and to make a difference. And with Jake by her side, she knew that anything was possible.